available publicly. I do just now want to welcome Mr. Cliff and Ms. Collier. Mr. Cliff is joining us from Cherish Life Queensland and Ms. Collier is from the Right to Life Australia. I wanted to give you an opportunity to make an opening statement if you have one.
Great.
Mr. Cliff.
Yeah. Senators, thank you for your time this morning. The goal of this bill is very simple. This bill will ensure that an Australian child who has been born alive as a result of a failed abortion procedure will in the future be entitled to the same level of medical care and treatment as any other newborn child. As it stands, this is not the case. And until this bill gets passed, potentially this afternoon, tonight or tomorrow or some other time in the near future, a child will be born alive from a failed abortion procedure and they will be prevented from any life-saving treatment, essentially left to die. Senators, this is a horrendous reality of which your average tax-paying Australian is completely unaware of. Now, the likelihood of this happening is not as rare as those opposing this bill are likely to suggest. I want to now just present some clear empirical statistics, in other words, objective facts. In Queensland from 2010 to 2020, there was a total of 1,153 late-term abortions, of which 328 babies were born alive. In Victoria, from the same period, there was a total of 3,776 late-term abortions, of which 396 babies were born alive. That's a total of 724 babies in 10 years. And listen, if it was only one baby, this bill would be worth it. Alongside statistics, we also have other empirical evidence. Numerous survival testimonies, I'm sure, which you'll hear of today, of those who have survived an abortion procedure and went on to live a full life. However, closer to home, an Australian baby girl, again, by the name of Jessica Jane, was not so fortunate. 22-week-old Jessica survived the abortion procedure inside her mother's womb. However, tragically, she would then go on to die from the procedure outside of her womb. She lived, she breathed, she cried, but 80 minutes later, she died. And I'm not sure if you've read the coroner's report from Jessica Jane's case, but conclusions from his expert opinion are very powerful. And I want to quickly read some of them here. This is a selection of Coroner Greg Kavanagh's comments. In 80 minutes of Jessica's life, she had a separate and independent existence to her mother. The deceased was not and should not be described as a fetus or anything else that diminishes her status as a human being. The deceased, having been born alive, deserves all the dignity, respect and value that our society places on human life. In my view, this is the coroner. Newly born, unwanted and premature babies should have the same rights. And listen to this. The fact that her death was inevitable should not affect her entitlement to such care and attention. And we know deep down, don't we, that the coroner's right. Regardless of the circumstances of birth, all Australian babies should be entitled to the best medical care and attention that Australia has to offer. Yet currently this isn't the case. In summary, regardless of what you may hear from those who oppose this bill, in no way does this proposal create more barriers to abortion laws. Again, all we are simply asking is to ensure that a baby born alive as a result of a failed abortion procedure is entitled to the same level of medical care and treatment as any other newborn child. That includes, if necessary, upon medical assessment, the possibility of life-sustaining treatment. If you guys are against discrimination in Australia, if you guys are against oppression in Australia, if you guys are for equality in Australia, this is the bill for you, and I urge you to get behind it. Thank you for your time.
I might throw to our witnesses at the table if they would like to add anything.
Yeah, I think, Senator, the problem we're having is, again, as already been pointed out, the only guidelines we have at Queensland in terms of, the clinical guidelines here. So all we can go off is what they've provided. And to go back to your earlier question about the level of palliative care, again, number one in the guidelines says, handle the baby gently and carefully and wrap to provide warmth. That's it. You know, and
sorry, Mr. Cliff, yeah. That's the Queensland guidelines you're quoting.
Yes, that's the Queensland, yeah. But the big problem, for, if you like, for us is number three, where it says do not provide life-sustaining treatment, e.g. gastric tubes, IV lines and oxygen therapy. So that's what's being prevented from these children. So, yeah, there's a measure, if you like, a small measure of palliative care. but they are being prevented from life-sustaining or even an assessment to see if they can have life-sustaining treatment. And that's the crux, really, to be honest.
Okay. I might leave it there at the moment.
Thank you,
Share it
Senator
around.
Urquhart. Senator Antic.
Yeah, just thank you, and this is perhaps one for Matthew as well. Just on the issue of the Queensland healthcare guidelines, which, I mean, they do spell out, and it is, I mean, from where I sit, quite extraordinary to read that. Number one, handle the baby gently and carefully. Number two, offer opportunities for support for the family's wishes. Three, do not provide life-sustaining treatment. Provide sensitive emotional support and reassurance to the parents, and then document the date and time or end of life occurs. So it's sit back and watch, basically, as this potentially as a baby is struggling and potentially in a great deal of pain. Most Australians wouldn't understand that, would not know that that was the case. And I think, and I'm interested in your views on whether this is your belief as well, that is entirely inconsistent in my mind with other facets of our law. If you've made quite rightly the point in your submission there that the Queensland Criminal Code in that very state talks about when a child becomes a human being. I mean, even on that measure, and there'd be a divergence of views about that subject, I'm sure, but even under the Criminal Code in that very state, a child becomes a person capable of being killed when it has completely proceeded in a living state from the body of its mother, whether it has breathed or not, and whether it has independent circulation or not, and whether the navel string is severed or not. I've never heard it called a navel string before. It's umbilical cord to me. But in any event, just tell us a little bit about what you think about the inconsistency of the two positions there. I mean, it would seem to me to be totally inconsistent with other human rights.
Yes, Senator, I completely agree. I think you just hit the nail on the head. The guidelines here that we're seeing in terms of the termination of pregnancy guidelines and the criminal code in Queensland are completely inconsistent. That's the reality.
Yeah.
You know, and that needs to be cleared up ultimately. We
heard from the Australian Christian Lobby earlier about the difficulty they've had in getting statistics about some of this, and I find that particularly telling about the manner in which there is motived for this story to be told to the Australian people. I think the Australian people would be very shocked if they learned that this was a common practice. Your organisation, Cherish Life in Queensland, have you had similar difficulty locating statistics to find it?
Yeah, well, I think that's across the board. I think all organisations have struggled to get statistics. And again, just anecdotal experience. I obviously got a strange accent from the UK, and I've been involved in pro-life work in the UK. And every year the NHS released the statistics. It's not even an issue. It's not even a problem. But I was shocked when I come here that you guys don't have any statistics. It's really bizarre to me, if I'm honest. I can't understand why. And as Wendy mentioned before, this is a benefit across the board. You know, I don't understand why you haven't got these statistics.
Right, but it's very confronting, perhaps. I think that's probably all from me. I'll pass back to Senator Canavan.
I've just got one final question back to Mr. Cliff or Ms. Collier. In the Cherish Life submission, you mentioned the coroner's report of the Northern Territory, which has come up a few times, and you say that as a result of this inquest, the coroner recommended that newborn babies were immediately assessed for gestational age and viability by a medical practitioner. Has that recommendation at all been acted on in the Northern Territory or anywhere else in the country?
As far as I'm aware, Senator, no.
Okay. All right. Thank you,
Senator
Chair.
Canavan, Senator Urquhart.
Yeah, I just plus my understanding is that some are still being done, yes, beyond 20 weeks, yes.
Right.
But again, you could check that with the relevant Maori states, international, etc.
No, that's okay. If you don't know the answer, that's fine. Mr. Cliff or Ms. Collier, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sorry. I can comment in terms of obviously just anecdotal testimonies that I've heard from again healthcare practitioners. Again, this is we've heard that there are some that are very traumatised, but I can actually quote from Caroline De Costa, who's an obstetrician who's I presume opposing this bill, and she says here termination of pregnancy during late gestation is distressing for parents and can also be challenging for medical and midwifery staff. So again, this is as distressing not only for ourselves who would be looking to put forward this bill, but for even people within healthcare.
What about their? Sorry to sort of jump in, but what about what's your understanding in relation to them applying their clinical expertise and judgment? Is that, in your view, is that a good? Do they apply that professionally? And do you understand that they can provide palliative care where relevant existing guidelines and practices are?
Do I? Yeah, obviously I can't speak across the board. I don't know what goes on, but I can hope and imagine that they were doing their job to the best of their ability. I think the guidelines is hamstrings them a little bit to not being able to offer the full amount of care that they should be offering.
Yeah. And at the moment, as I understand, it appears that Queensland has the best guidelines, or
well, it has the guidelines.
Yeah.
It has the guidelines that we don't have any other guidelines at all in any other states at the moment.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Okay. Ms. Collier, did you want to add anything, or you don't have to? I'm just giving you the option.